we've got Avinash Gorakshakar, Head of Research, Profitmart Securities, joining us this morning. Good morning, Avinash. Pleasure having you back with us here on News9. First up, let's talk about the global markets. There is this theory about the AI bubble and potentially the AI bubble likely to bust. In fact, you've also heard from Sundar Pichai saying that there's going to be a lot of trouble in case the AI bubble is indeed a bubble. And we are seeing this massive selling happening on the Magnificent Seven stocks. How dark do you think that story could turn out to be if it indeed is a bubble?
Yeah, good morning, Kartik. I think clearly yesterday's fall in the US market was triggered by the AI stocks. And I think one reason for the sell off was obviously because valuations have now reached a level where I feel that they look little unreasonable and unsustainable. And I think Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, has also commented that, there is a lot of irrationality now in the valuations of such AI companies. So I think, whether the bubble will explode, in the very short term or going forward, one thing is very clear that these kind of valuations are difficult to be sustained. And in case there is some problem in the US markets, that could obviously extend over to other markets also. So I think, Google himself, the CEO himself has said that could impact their business also. So I think to a large extent, I think it would be US driven because in India, there are very few AI companies which are direct plays. And that's probably one of the reasons why FI flows have reduced. One theory in the market is that there are not many AI opportunities in Indian markets, and that's the reason not much flows actually came here. But if at all the AI bubble, goes out completely, then I think you're going to see a lot of flows again coming to emerging markets like India. Of course, there could be a short-term aberration even in emerging markets like India. But I think here we have a very strong manufacturing base. Most importantly, I think, Piyush Goyal yesterday has commented very clearly that the trade deal is very near to get completed. So, if that happens, then the markets would obviously get a big sentimental booster, especially for the Indian markets. So, net, I think for the US markets, it's going to be a little volatile as well as turbulent. But for the Indian markets, I don't think you're going to see any major sell-off because of this factor.
So let's just stay on the US markets for a minute longer, Avinash. And in your opinion, with all the spooking out of investors when it comes to the Magnificent Seven, the big tech stocks in the US, would you call it consolidation or would you call it fear at this moment?
No, it is fear. Basically, in the US markets, I think people who have made money in the AI segment have benefited significantly. But I think if at all something goes wrong, then I think a lot of wealth and a lot of money and capital is going to be wiped out. And that is the fear which is now prevailing in the US markets. I think clearly AI stocks have jumped significantly beyond their intrinsic worth. And that is probably the reason why the markets are edgy. Upside now looks to be fairly limited, but the downside seems to be quite large. If at all any crisis happens, then I think the AI stocks will be battered down quite significantly.
All right, now let's shift focus to the Indian markets. You had touched upon it. Now, the fact that India does not really have a direct linkage with the big tech stocks and India's sort of, work in the AI domain is still fairly limited, to put it mildly. Do you think this sort of meltdown in the US is going to bode well for India's IT sector, given the fact that we are still services oriented and we are seeing some sort of a green shoot, if I can call it that, in the IT pack today? And that's a rarity, given that overall the sentiment of the market is fairly down.
Yeah, I think if you look at the valuations of most of the IT companies, these appear to be fairly attractive and reasonable because they have beaten down from their 52-week highs. And most importantly, Kartik, if you see the balance sheets, the cash flows are strong, the cash position is very strong. And all these Indian companies, IT companies, are sitting on a very healthy order book. If you look at Infosys, one of the largest buybacks of 18,000 crores. Again, if you look at numbers from HCL Tech, Coforge in the Q2 numbers, I think despite being not a very great, quarter, period, I think the quarter performance was far too better what the market expected. And I think, going forward, looking at that kind of traction expected post the India-US trade policy happens, you're going to see a lot of US deals getting signed up, which are now, almost there for a long time in the pipeline. So I think, yes, Indian IT companies could benefit, but of course, we may not see the immediate impact coming in. But over the next, say, couple of quarters, definitely we could see little better kind of, order wins and better kind of margin accretion, at least for the next financial year.
All right, so that's the view on the IT sector. Let's pivot now to the BFSI sector. And again, there are expectations that RBI is going to go ahead and cut another 25 basis points in the December MPC meet. I don't know what your belief or theory on that is, because inflation numbers have come out fantastic, absolutely. So given that there could be potentially a rate cut of 25 basis points at least in December, how do you think the BFSI sector is poised from here on?
No, I think the rate cut looks very much possible, although the retail inflation number, Kartik, has been surprisingly very low. Now, there are two schools of thought. Most people are saying that this kind of retail inflation is not good because it shows that demand is not growing. There are another, people who are saying that a rate cut now is definitely warranted. I stay in the camp where possibly a rate cut will definitely boost up the Indian industry, and I think it may be possible. As far as the BFSI segment is concerned, I think the biggest beneficiary would be the banks, the housing finance companies, the NBFCs. I think within the banks, we continue to like the PSU banks, something like an SBI, Bank of Baroda, Canara Bank, smaller banks like Bank of Maharashtra, a federal bank. So I think, there are many choices available. And I think the Q3 number is going to surprise the market because Q2 was definitely better than Q1. And Q3 will actually reflect the full impact of the GST cuts. In fact, the government has very clearly indicated that to boost the consumption, liquidity has to be provided by the banks. And I think this is a busy season period. So I think you're going to see a good number of banks, especially the public sector banks, doing well. On the private sector banks, we continue to like ICICI Bank. But I think here also the numbers in the Q2 were not very great, but yet overall a steady performance in a challenging period.
All right, steady performance in a challenging atmosphere. Let's move now to the defensive pack, which are the FMCG stocks. And yesterday we saw that pretty much the entire FMCG pack was in the red. But today, are we seeing some value buying? Is there any other intrinsic reason why HUL and Nestle are so healthily in the green this morning?
So I think, see, my sense is that GST cuts actually got implemented from 22nd September, Kartik, and a lot of FMCG companies reported that their dealers had got old stocks. So to do the adjustment, it took some time. So you could probably see volume growth kicking in, good amount of revenue growth in value terms also coming in, because this time, fortunately, apart from the rate cuts and the GST cuts, the monsoon has been much better than what expectations have been. Rural demand is again picking up. So I'm quite hopeful that the third quarter would be a much more stronger quarter. In fact, Lever in its conference call update clearly mentioned that the October to December period could be a much stronger period in terms of volume growth. So I think, that is probably the reason the markets are looking forward that Q3 could be a better kind of period where both volume growth as well as value growth could come in a much better way.
All right. Stay with us, Avinash. I also want to talk to you about the IPO buzz which was on the Lal Street. And of course, it has all turned out to be fairly well, at least for not just Groww, but also for PhysicsWallah. In fact, PhysicsWallah has made a strong debut yesterday. The EdTech firm's shares have settled 44% higher than the IPO price, closing at about 157 rupees or so on the NSE. And that's ending about 8% above the opening price. Now, so of course, PhysicsWallah is one part of the story. There's also the story of Groww, and Groww has also seen massive gain. In fact, I was reading that as much as 94% gain ever since it listed. And just yesterday alone, the Groww stock was up. In fact, it ended the day about 7% higher. And this was the fifth day of trading gains. Since its IPO, which was listed, which was in fact was announced for subscription at 100 rupees, it has grown more than 90%. And this has overall taken the market cap of Groww to about 1.1 lakh crore rupees or so. So, Avinash, this IPO season has been absolutely fantastic, not just Lenskart, which started off with so much controversy around it, but eventually sort of, held on to its own. And then we've seen Groww, and now we're seeing PhysicsWallah. What should the retail investor strategy be when it comes to participating in the IPO market and then staying put with those stocks that they get?
No, I think, Kartik, any investor who's made 90% gain in a stock like Groww in just about 7 or 8 days, I think should consider himself very lucky.
Okay.
Because I think, 90% gain in such a short period warrants that at least some part of the profit should be encashed, because beyond a particular level, you're going to see a little bit of profit booking also coming in.
Right.
The law of gravity always says that whatever goes up and goes down very fast actually, corrects also very quickly. And PhysicsWallah, of course, is a very niche business, a very strong business model. And I think, one thing which I would like to tell your viewers is that don't go by the oversubscription levels. PhysicsWallah was subscribed by just about 2 times, but still it got a good response because the business inherently is very good. I think at this level also, if investors take at least a 12 to 18 month call, I think good money can be made in a company like PhysicsWallah. As far as Groww is concerned, I think at least book partial profit because, at some point of time, you could be seeing a little bit of selling pressure also.
But do you think this case, and I want to come back to Groww specifically, do you think this course of 90% higher from listing day, was it a case of the company actually undervaluing itself partly? While I understand that there could be some profit booking now with a 90% gain in 7 days, which to my sort of memory is unheard of. But do you think the company, maybe when it went in for IPO, was undervalued and did not really realize its true potential?
No, I think the IPO was fairly priced, Kartik. I think at 100 rupees, it was a bargain. I think considering the fact that it's the #1 online broker ahead of Zerodha. And most importantly, the markets are giving it a premium for the simple reason that they believe that incremental client additions for Groww are going to be much better than Zerodha and the other online players. And I think Groww has also commented very clearly. The management has said that they are not going to just do retail broking. They're also looking at very high niche areas, profitable segments like wealth management. So, all these things are making the investors, especially the large, investors are quite excited about the growth prospects of the company. Plus, the management is very aggressive. It's a young management which has scaled up the business very well. But as everyone is aware, Kartik, at some point of time, a stock which moves up from 100 to 180 or 190 in just about 6-7 days, we might see a little bit of corrective, kind of price correction. Nevertheless, we are positive on the longer term, but in the short term, definitely some profit booking could be expected.
All right. And final question on PhysicsWallah. Of course, you were mentioning that, of course, this sector, if you look at PhysicsWallah, it comes from that edtech sector and potentially among the only sort of profitable, thriving companies, given the fact that we all remember what happened with Byju's, even though now there are new players in the fray and some old players in the fray to pick up whatever is left of Byju's. But given that this sector was marred in controversy, was marred with the ethics issues, the fact that a company like PhysicsWallah has pretty much impressed the Wall Street and impressed investors, what should the strategy really be for investors? Do you see a massive upside in scaling up operations for PhysicsWallah, given that pandemic is now pretty much long forgotten history?
No, I think, see, Kartik, the pandemic obviously opened up a lot of doors for online companies. But I think if you look at the content and the pricing strategy which PhysicsWallah has adopted, they are one of those players which have priced their products very competitively. They approach the mass market with a clear focus on content. And I think, at the end of the day, they have managed to actually get into the pockets of the online community, which is a mass market for them. So my sense is that over the next 2 years, the management has clearly indicated that there are many more new initiatives which the management would like to do on the online side, introduce new products, introduce new kind of, revenue kind of streams for them. So to that extent, somebody who wants to take a longer term call, at least the next 12 to 18 months, of course, the management has to deliver on the numbers. Once the stock gets listed, the market should be looking at every quarter number. So I think if the management delivers on the numbers and if they keep up to the expectation, then I think definitely some further re-rating is possible. But I think look at it from a medium to long term.
All right, a medium to long-term perspective is warranted on PhysicsWallah. Avinash, Gorakshakar, that's all we have time for, but a fantastic conversation, and thank you so much for your time with us this morning.